Welcome. What is up? Welcome to the Mixer. I am your host, RC. I am joined by my co-host here, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's great to be here. First things first, do not forget to like and subscribe to our podcast feed, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual places, and follow us on social media. We're at FCY Mixer. Twitter's the primary one. If you want to follow our individual Twitter accounts, the links, it's in the show notes. Check the show notes, and yeah, and check us out on YouTube. It's the YouTube channel. You can see the lovely title trophy, the one, the only Dirk in the only league that matters, of which I am the reigning, defending, undisputed champion, right over my shoulder. So you can see that on YouTube if you wanna peep its awesomeness and all its glory. So yeah, thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Tilts, we always follow with Jeff. What are you tilting this week, if anything?
I mean, nothing. Just getting ready for football season. Uh, Only thing that threw me off a little bit was the NFL essentially scheduling a 1 week bye before the regular season started after preseason.
Mm-hmm.
But I've come to grips with that and ready to go. College football this weekend. So
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I had a mini panic attack when I realized, week 3 of the preseason was last weekend, and then I'm like, wait, there's another weekend, and that's when we're supposed to be drafting. Does the regular season start a week earlier? I freaked out for a second, but double check the calendar. I was like, okay, there's a gap week. All right,
yeah,
that makes sense, I guess. But
I had that
but
same thought. I was like, I thought Sunday we were going to be drafting right after week one games ended. And I was like, wait, we've never done this before. So,
yeah, that would have been a train wreck. Well, I got some tilts, some sports related tilts, so it'll transition us into our content. Arsenal, I mean, just a complete, absolute dumpster fire. I don't think they've scored a goal in the EPL season. They're at the bottom of the table. I think Tottenham's at the top of the table after 3 games, and it's just not not good to be a gooner, which I think is one of their chants. It's quite bad. And I keep bringing this up. I could have been a Liverpool fan. I mean, shit, I could have been an Everton fan. Any team was on the table, and I kind of got incepted into being an Arsenal fan. And I mean, the first few years were kind of good. I felt a little dirty rooting for them since they were good, and now they're terrible, which is totally playing into my masochistic tendencies.
back to normal for you.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, I'm actually getting joy out of this collapse somehow. There's something wrong with me. There's clearly something wrong with me. But yeah, it still sucks. And the other thing, I mean, just since we're talking a little EPL, a little talking soccer, Ronaldo is coming to Manchester United. I mean, we are a Team Messi podcast, but Jeff, do you have any thoughts on Mr. Underpants, Mr. I mean, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Ronaldo, CR7, coming back home again to Manchester United, where it all started.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but it's weird to me that it felt like teams were running away from Ronaldo. Like people just didn't want to sign him for whatever reason. He's linked to Man City. There were a few other teams in there, and then they just kind of passed. Uh, Especially when Man City's still looking for was still looking for a striker. He could fill that role really well. So that was kind of interesting. But other than that, it'll be exciting. It's another reason to watch soccer on Saturday and Sunday mornings. I just have to say my favorite thing about the soccer season so far was I was watching Chelsea Liverpool last week, and I messaged in our group chat to you, Sean, and Matt what happened to Arsenal, and you tried to act like you didn't know who I was talking about. That was pretty solid.
Yeah. I had to do that. It was just, I mean, it was just a disaster. We're trying to, Mr. Brightside now, so I'm just eliminating all negativity like that from my life, and we're going to see how that goes. Speaking of negativity, my other tilt was the Belgian GP, or as I am calling it, the greatest Formula One Grand Prix that never was. And I've only been hyping this race for about 2 months, and then we get the rain and we get an awesome qualifying session. And then we wake up on Sunday and it's a wet track, just epic scenes. And then they just can't even race because it's too wet. Just to do a quick recap. So qualifying, the main, that was the main event of the weekend, because of what happened on Sunday race day. But both Ferraris ended up missing Q3, which wasn't even mentioned in the freaking broadcast. Like, I don't know how we've gotten to this point with Ferrari where, they're just seriously a literal afterthought now, that they don't even get mentioned. Like, if it was McLaren or like Aston freaking Martin or Alpine missing Q3, I feel like that would get mentioned on the broadcast. But like Ferrari just, I think, was like 11th and 13th or something, or 11th, 12th, didn't make it. And then they don't even say anything. It's like, oh yeah, Leclerc got bumped at the very end by Ricciardo or something. And like, that was it. That's all they said. They didn't even acknowledge that both Ferraris were out. Anyway, and they were supposed to have a huge engine upgrade coming out of the summer break. So hashtag not great. So Q3 started. Lando decided he was going to go for it. He looked good all weekend. He usually looks good, great in qualifying. And, with it being wet, the great equalizer is the rain. But on his first hot lap, he lost it at the Eau Rouge Radillon complex. And yeah, went into the barriers. Nice guy, Mr. Vettel, followed him up the, and pulled over to the side to check him. He had a radio message saying, like, what did I say? What did I say? That's too wet, I think is kind of word for word what he said.
Oh, I think you left out before Lando took off in Q3, Vettel had said something to his race engineers of like, they should red flag this. It's not safe. Right. And then Lando, as he was coming around the last little chicane, also made a comment to his engineers about it not being completely safe and they probably shouldn't do it. But Lando was already kind of past the point of no return, and he either had to put in a lap or essentially do another lap for no reason. Right. So he chose to put in a lap, and then that's when he lost it. Right. And then obviously, Lando does that. Vettel checks on him. They red flag it or whatever. And then it goes from there. But I did find that interesting that, Lando as well said something before he took off. He didn't seem as like dire as Vettel did. Vettel was just straight up like, this should be red flagged. Lando said this probably isn't the best. Basically, like, this probably isn't the best qualifying, and we should probably stop it. But he wasn't like super dire, and then he loses it, right, going down possibly the fastest part of any track. So
definitely the most dangerous.
Yeah.
So Lando crashes, and then they red flag it. Nice guy, Mr. Vettel, pulls over. I'm getting a little tired of this version of Vettel. He was, so full disclosure, he was like my favorite driver for basically a decade. From like 2000, I can't remember when he burst up, like 2006, 2007. Is when I guess it was 2006, because he was like a backup driver for BMW. and then he got the Toro Rosso contract, I think, in 2007. But and so kind of watched him mature, and he had some huge frustrations with Ferrari, and he had some antics with Red Bull towards the end of his tenure that didn't sit well with me. And now all of a sudden he's he's with Aston Martin, and he seems like he's matured, but I don't know. Some of it, I don't know how much is. I feel like he's almost playing a part where he has like. I mean, he's just. He seems great. I just hope he's being genuine with all this stuff, and it isn't just a like he's in the freaking Formula Dank or something, and just like, oh, this will get me, like, you know what I mean? Like there might be some false motives or not so
Right.
sincere motives. Anyway, I probably shouldn't be throwing shade at him. He seems like he's matured, but yeah, I got like one eyebrow up. Like, I'm still waiting for to go full praising the guy, but I am glad. Anyway, a little too much of a side note there. So they red flagged Q3, and unlike on Sunday, they were actually able to resume, and it looked like George Russell was going to take a surprise pole, but then Verstappen just tucked it in front of Russell. I think he was the last one on track, so he had the best conditions, and Russell was ahead of Hamilton by like a thousandth of a second or a hundredth of a second.
Yeah.
So I mean, just in a freaking Williams. So hats off to him. And then it was just an absolute mess on race day. Sergio Perez crashed his car on the way to the grid. And I mean, there was a whole debacle whether he could rejoin or could not rejoin the race since it was red flagged, but it ended up not really mattering. They just kept delaying the start of the race, thinking it was get better. The radar wasn't great, I guess, so they were kind of just, and it basically just got too late in the day, so they sent them out under safety cars, did 2 laps, which is the minimum, and then they awarded half points. And I mean, that's just how it ends. Verstappen wins, Russell finished second, Hamilton finished third. Ricciardo, who did really well in qualifying, he had his highest qualifying in a McLaren. He got fourth, so that was great to see. And then somehow both Ferraris finished in the points thanks to penalties and Perez crashing 8th and 10th. And I think they've actually made up ground because some of the other drivers like Alonso and Ocon, I think, both finished out of the points for Alpine. And anyway, so I mean, that's the state of Ferrari. When they finish 8th and 10th, they're making up ground in their title fight. I mean, Jeff, what were your thoughts on this freaking debacle that ended up kind of sucking?
So just to go back to qualifying real quick, Lando seemed to be the quickest and not really close to anyone through Q1 and Q2. Assuming he probably would have done the same thing in Q3 because he looked great on Saturday. As far as like his teammate Danny Ricciardo went, it ends up being a 4th place finish, a 4th place qualifying start. He didn't particularly qualify all that well in Q1 and Q2 though. Like, I think that's the thing. Like, he ends up putting a great lap in Q3 and gets 4. But he like snuck into Q2 and snuck into Q3, right? Like, he wasn't like up there near the top the whole time, but he figured it out at the end. Lewis had a weird qualifying to me in that he was always putting in purple sectors, but he could never put them in like back to back, right? Like, he would do like purple sector 1 and then green sector 2, yellow sector 3, right? Or things like that, where he never really got a complete lap. Just seemed weird, especially because he's pretty good in the rain, and that car is really good. I thought it was great from George. George is probably my favorite driver, and seeing him put in a lap like that. Also, his teammate Latifi, I think, finished ninth in the race, qualified like 10th or 11th or something like that. So that was kind of cool for them, back-to-back races with both guys getting in the points. As far as race day went, real disappointing in terms of like not seeing any real racing. And I think the view I've seen from most of the drivers is that they were disappointed they didn't like that a race happened and they didn't get a chance to like pass or gain points or anything like that. And I kind of side with them on that. How can you really call it a race if there's no actual racing happening? I understand like the 2-lap rule, the half point rule, if you don't get 75% of the race, and like that stuff makes a lot of sense to me. But just doing 2 laps behind a safety car and calling it a race doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Obviously glad for George, but at the end of the day, like you're not giving the fans anything. You're literally just parading the cars around and saying, all right, how we qualified is how we're going to finish. I would have much rather seen them postpone the race and try to come back to it later in the year, maybe at the end of the year if they have to or something like that. But, it's tough. You're dealing with, everyone's schedules. I was reading they probably wouldn't have been able to postpone it a day because getting stewards and marshals out there would have been hard because from my understanding, a lot of the stewards and marshals have full-time jobs outside of just being there for one race, right? So, everyone was in a tough situation. I think the FIA did what they thought was best, and that's their prerogative. I just hope they go back and look at this so that we don't get something like this in the future. Like, it was just really disappointing race day.
Yeah, it's kind of unique Formula One that there's the possibility for this to happen, and then the challenges of, not only getting the drivers to come back for, a possible an additional race weekend, but just the logistics of it all, like shipping the tires, the fuel, like it's right. A whole. Each of these Grand Prix is like almost like a miniature Super Bowl minus Shakira right. and J-Lo on stage, which they do at a few races. Like Singapore has a concert usually, and so does Coda. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, they, I don't know what they could have done differently. One thing I wish they would have done is just put the cars out there and ran them behind the safety car for 10 or 15 laps to try to clear the water. And then just to try to get, like, even if it was 5 laps, if they could just get like a 5-lap sprint, but especially since my nice guy, Mr. Vettel, called him out on Saturday and there was that crash at Eau Rouge, and which is the most dangerous corner in the world probably, in which a driver died at a few years ago in Formula 2, which I've mentioned already. And there was a huge crash on Saturday in the women's race or qualifying, maybe it was Friday, but there was a huge wreck there, and the track was relatively dry at that time. So they're just they erred on the side of caution, which is probably the right thing to do. But damn, man, this race was going to be epic. And even if we got 5 laps, it would have been epic, and we just couldn't get it.
I do think there's one thing they could do, and it would suck for like us over here, but I thought Max actually had a great idea, and that and I don't remember his exact proposal, but it was something along the lines of like, if you see rain in the forecast like this, like one of the reasons they did what they did was because they didn't have much more time to actually like get the race in terms of like remaining light in the day or whatever, so people could see. And Max brought up a point of like, they start the race at like 3 p.m. back there, right? Why not just start the day at noon and give yourself a much larger window if you see that it's supposed to rain and like be pretty bad? I think that's an interesting idea. It probably throws things off, but it would make a lot more sense if you're not sure of the weather forecast to just give yourself more time to play with.
In the modern millennial world where we stream everything and don't watch shit on TV, that would be perfect. But I mean, they have deals with networks and stuff. And what's going to happen? What's going to happen at the darts tournament, Jeff? How are you going to find another slot for them? They're really into darts over there, but is why I'm saying that. But yeah, I mean,
I know, I've seen it.
That would be a major barrier, and it freaking sucks. So yeah, I mean, I'm just disappointed. And I mean, you had guys on the broadcast saying, well, I've raced in worse than this. You know, Verstappen saying it's not that bad. And of course, he didn't have a full grid of cars in front of him. So, and of course, he doesn't want half points because he's behind in the title fight.
Right.
But I mean, looking at the weather, there was a race that Schumacher won in Monaco that was very heavy rain, but that track is much slower speeds. There was the 2007 Japanese Grand Prix at Fuji, which is an amazing race. It's on YouTube. I suggest watching it if you're interested in it. But yeah, it was pouring down rain. And I remember this is actually like an early gripe I had with Hamilton because he backed up the grid and Vettel ran into the back of Webber when he was running like fourth or something. And Vettel could have got his first podium in a freaking Toro Rosso when Toro Rosso was terrible. So yeah, I mean, was a classic race in the heavy wet rain. And then there was another one that I'm kind of forgetting. But anyway, you know, what could have been? They're going to the Netherlands, Zandvoort track, which looks terrible. I am not stoked for this, but I don't know. Maybe qualifying will be wild. There's going to be a lot of orange. It's going to be a lot of orange. So we'll see. You know, maybe slight chance of rain for that race. So I mean, let's hope for a better result. All right, so I wanted to touch briefly on the Padres and how they've been doing and what's been going on with the team. They've been volatile AF, as the kids would say. You know, they got no hit by the Diamondbacks just, what was it, a week or two ago? And then they almost no hit said Diamondbacks last night with Blake Snell. He went through 7 allowing no hit, and then he was on a high pitch count. I guess he had thrown 120 pitches in his previous start. So, I mean, is this how Snellzilla got his groove back? Does that work? Hell, I've never seen that movie, but yeah, and then you know they dropped some games against the Phillies. Everything's starting to blur together, but you know, they got shut out. They got no hit. It's just been all over the place. Then you have Joe Musgrove. It was against the Angels where they got just wrecked. And then Joe Musgrove in the same series, he goes a complete game shutout. So, I mean, they're just up and down. And I think my main, the team, I don't know if they're a game and a half back or half game back from the wild card, but they're still in it. We got the tough schedule coming up. But what's really been grinding my gears is just the sentiment on Twitter. I mean, it's freaking like the sky is falling. They're starting to turn on the players. Like they're getting pissed off at Tatis for looking upset that things aren't going right and for standing in the outfield. There are calls for him to go back at shortstop so he can see more into the game. And it's just like, what is this? What is this crap? And then people on Twitter attacking each other. It's just, for a while, I had hoped that we would capture some of the Padres Twitter audience, but I mean, those people are just, I mean,
they're a mess.
Surprise! Internet commenters that it makes a big part of their social interactions are maybe not the most stable individuals. They should do something productive, like start a podcast and then criticize the people that do that. That's like the galaxy brain
Exactly.
move. Yeah, complain about those people. Don't complain about the players. Um, Anywho, I don't know if you have any comments on that, but like Padre fans, we need to. I know this is new for us to be relevant and to be in a wild card race in August into September now. Happy September, folks. Um, but yeah, I mean, what do you think from the outside? Have you seen any of this crap, or you know? I mean, you're a freaking
I'm,
Yankee fan, so you don't really have that much experience with languishing in irrelevancy. So, what are your thoughts,
yeah,
man?
I mean, I've seen a little bit of this, and I just think it's funny.
You
I
would.
think you're just starting to see more and more people care about the Padres. That's why you're seeing a bunch of this stuff happen. So I think overall it's a positive.
Yeah, I mean, it was cute when the Padres sucked and they would somehow miraculously beat or sweep much better teams, and the Padres Twitter would be up in the mentions of the opposing team's final score thread tweet with dank memes and such. But now it's just starting to turn into some infighting because there's actually something on the line. And yeah, I mean, just like, I don't know, get thicker skin, have a little bit more resolve, and like, let's freaking grind this last month or so of the season. And and yeah, let's be positive. Mr. Brightside now. Mr. Brightside moving forward. So I mean, we're bearing the lead here. It is freaking fantasy football draft week. We just had NFL cuts. Week 1 is up. Not this weekend, next weekend. I am hyped. Of course, we had some huge cuts. Cam Newton got cut by the Patriots. Mac Jones will be starting there. Dalton has been announced as a starter in Chicago. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to start in San Francisco. Those are the big headlines with the quarterbacks. I mean, Jeff, what are your thoughts on these quarterbacks getting the reins? I mean, not to mention Zach Wilson will be starting, Trevor Lawrence will be starting, but I mean, we already knew that. And I think Teddy Bridgewater is going to start over Drew Lock in Denver. That's the other
Yeah,
one.
and Jameis in New Orleans.
Yeah.
But I think the only like real surprise here is the Cam news. Cam getting cut is just really surprising because he was pretty good this preseason. Depending on where you look, there were some places that had him graded out as the best quarterback during the preseason. But Mac Jones was really good as well, right? It's not like Mac came out and was a bum. There was some talk that Cam's vaccination status might have been one of the reasons he got cut. And for his part, Belichick said it wasn't. But you never know when the NFL has incentivized teams to get everyone fully vaccinated. It would be no surprise if that came into play, whether teams want to admit it or not. I know Urban Meyer said that it was talked about, and then the Jags backtracked that and said that nobody's vaccination status led to them getting cut. But in a league that is very heavily prioritizing getting vaccinated, and they're doing it by potentially winning and losing games, depending on who is not vaccinated and who is not positive, right? It wouldn't surprise me if a decent amount of guys that got cut were cut because they weren't vaccinated. As far as it goes, I mean, Mac Jones might be the rookie QB to have. That Patriots offense is going to operate pretty quickly. He looks like he can play. and for how great Tom Brady has been in his career, Belichick tries to make it as easy as possible on his quarterbacks, right? That's one of the reasons they can shuffle so many different guys in and out, is they just try to make things easy. They're not trying to be overly complicated. Um, and so I wouldn't be surprised if Mac has a really good year. I wouldn't be surprised if he looked like the best rookie quarterback. I still think that's Trevor Lawrence by a pretty decent margin. And he looked like it in his third preseason game. He looked like he was finally getting into rhythm in an NFL game. As far as like Dalton in Chicago and Jimmy in San Francisco, these aren't surprises, especially when San Francisco said Trey Lance had something up with one of his fingers. Uh, you knew Jimmy was probably getting the start at that point. Um, Dalton, to Nagy's credit, even though I think he's wrong, he said it's Dalton all along. I wouldn't be surprised if Fields is in there by week 4. Um, but, Chicago's been telling us what's going to happen. So uh, I don't think I would touch Dalton in a fantasy league. But
Yeah.
hey, more power to you if that's the route you want to go.
About the Urban Meyer comments and the vaccination status, it being a factor or something that was quote unquote discussed. I can't remember who it was. I think it was some tape analyst for, I think it might have been Matt Waldman or Matt Miller or somebody on Twitter that I follow quote tweeted the comments from Urban Meyer, and he said, quiet part out loud, just basically saying like, maybe you shouldn't have said this, Urban.
Right.
Anyway, I thought that was hilarious. I mean, just speaking of the Jaguars, they had Travis Etienne go down, Liz Frank. Hashtag not great for outlook for his injury. Not too many backs have successfully recovered from that injury, so really, really feel bad for him.
Yeah.
I mean, at least he's got his rookie contract, which I don't know how much of that is guaranteed, if any, due to injury. But I mean, that's a whole nother topic. And yeah, man, I'm super excited. We kind of wish Trey Lance would have got the handles at San Francisco. I think JimmyG might actually do well. I think San Francisco has an easy start to their season. Teddy Bridgewater in Denver might be interesting. There is this talk of the Dolphins, which I didn't mention in the notes, trading for Deshaun Watson with the stipulation that if he's suspended due to the allegations that he has in Houston against him, that they, I don't know, wouldn't get that, and they're trying to get like a 6th-round pick. It's just so bizarre. Like, they have Tua. Like, why would you? I don't know, man. What are these guys doing here?
I mean, I've heard conflicting reports on this. Like, there's the report that the Dolphins are trying to trade for Watson, but then I've also seen other people that I follow that I fully believe that have said that this is Houston actually trying to get Deshaun Watson to okay them sending him to a different team, because apparently he has like a full no trade clause, and what they're trying to do is get Miami to say no, we don't want Deshaun Watson, so that he kind of has to say, well, if I'm leaving Houston, I got to go somewhere else, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, a lot of conflicting reports out there. From what I've seen, Tua's looked pretty good this preseason. They brought in some weapons that should, fit around him. And to me, it doesn't really make sense for them to like trade for Watson. Even if he were, I guess if there's no allegations, no chance of, him going to jail or anything like that, then I guess I'd understand it a little bit more. Maybe you swap Tua for Deshaun in that type of situation. But with where he's at legally right now, it just makes no sense to me why you would even take this on, right? Like, it's not like it's one person that's accused him. We're talking like 20 plus.
Yeah,
So,
not great.
you know,
Not
I
great.
also think though, like, my opinion, I know the NFL tends to drag their feet in situations like this, but the NFL should just put him on like the commissioner's list or something and just basically say like he can't play until this gets figured out. I think that would be the cleanest solution for everybody. I don't know why Goodell doesn't do something like that. I mean, it might be something in the collective bargaining as to he can't or something, but to me, that's just the easiest solution. Just the NFL say, look, he's not playing until this gets some sort of resolution.
Yeah, really not a good look for all parties involved at the moment. Hopefully it gets resolved. The other thing, I mean, I'm excited for what Max Jones might do to the Patriots offense, but at the same time, I also want him to fail because not only is he a Patriots quarterback, and we don't want Patriots fans to have happiness, which I'm sure is gonna just, you know, karma is gonna bite me because of that take, but also because a prominent figure close to us had a very pro Mac Jones take heading into the draft, and I want him to be wrong selfishly. There's nothing else other than that. It's just pure ego. Don't care. But yeah, I did want to mention. No, I'm not even going to mention it. I don't want to mention my underdog ownership values and how I may have somehow dodged any highly owned player getting injury or having bad outcomes happen. I don't want to mention how certain things have broke well for my ownership like rates on leagues because I don't want for that to come back and bite me. So I'm not going to mention it. I'm not going to mention
There you
how
go.
I dodged major injuries and that certain roles seem to be playing out well for my players. I don't want to mention that. I just want the simulation to be clear. I am not mentioning that. So Jeff, it is draft week, man. I didn't really put like too much on here, and I don't think we want to give away too many secrets.
Yeah.
Maybe post draft we can talk about players that were high on this year and all that, since most of our listeners are in our league. If you have fantasy questions though, and you're just hit us up on Twitter. Reach out. I know it's not just our league listening to this, so but by your download numbers. So yeah, if you have questions, like let us know. We're actually pretty knowledgeable on that stuff. A lot of experience playing. But Jeff, I mean, do you have a draft day routine? Or what's your go-to? Like, how do you get set up for draft day? It is the best day of the year. It is our Christmas, and it is this Sunday. So yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on draft day in general?
Well, it's changed obviously as, um, we used to for this league get together and draft live and in person. That was always a lot of fun. Since people have moved out, I've moved away. Uh, it's obviously going to be different, but in general, my routine stays the same. I do a lot of prep um, earlier in the season. Uh, Usually, I start way early, just getting like my little program, my draft rankings program set up, figure out where I'm going to get players from and all that. But that way, when it comes down to draft day, I just Sunday morning, I'll go on, I'll get the latest ADPs, I'll set it all up, and then I will essentially just be ready to draft. I don't do a whole lot, just kind of if I want a snack or a drink, I'll go get that earlier in the day. That way I have it ready. But I try to be, when draft season comes around, I try not to have to do a whole lot on the day of. So, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I just you check for last minute injuries. You always want to make sure that you have, guys crossed off if there's any last minute news. You don't want to be that guy in the draft that takes a guy that it was just announced needs season ending surgery or something.
Right.
I mean, for main drafts, for the mixer, the one, the only league for the dirt, head over to our buddies that host the draft, get settled in, start having some pops, and yeah, just like finding a good seat is is kind of the key, because you're going to be sitting there for an hour or two, and yeah, you want to be able to see the draft board. Don't be the guy in the corner that can't see shit and is having to ask around, or it's just really easy to get distracted. So you want to make sure you have good real estate in the draft room. I try to position myself where I'm in good company, maybe a little bit away from the sharks of the league, just so they can't peep your draft sheet or do anything like that. I'm a big elbow room guy, so I need my space. So yeah, I mean, that's it. And I mean, in the early rounds, I keep off the pops a little bit, kind of reserve one pop for round 1 through 6. But then after that, I mean, once you kind of got your build and you already have kind of have your later round targets in mind, where there's kind of less strategizing to how you want your roster composition to look like, depending on how you do in those early rounds, then it's just party time. And it's responsibly, it's party time responsibly. Don't get too crazy. But yeah, it's the best. And then afterwards, you just tell everybody, how much better your team is. And then you pick the one guy, the one guy in the league who usually does bad, that had a surprising draft, and you kind of give them like a backhand, a compliment, like, oh, like Mason drafted really well. Like, I really like Mason's team this year. And yeah, I mean, you just got to get the mind games going.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I'm excited. We have one draft. I'm really happy with that team. I mean, we had kickers going in like the single digit rounds, so that's always fun.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that there's kickers on the team. Anyway, yeah, man, it's the best week of the year. I'm super hyped. So yeah, I mean, do you have any final thoughts on before? I mean, this is going to be the last show probably before draft day, the draft, where we can recap everything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my real only thought is fantasy football is a lot more fun when you like your team. So I fully understand going and getting value. But if you don't like guys, you're not going to enjoy it, even if you're winning for the most part. So, especially later in the drafts, you get to round 10 and over, you're taking guys that likely aren't starters for you, that are going to be on the bench. So just go grab guys that you like, that kind of makes sense. I don't mean if someone's, should go in round 18 and you're in round 10, I don't necessarily mean doing that. But if you have someone that you have like, in round 11 and it's round 10, cool, take them around early just to make sure that you get them, that kind of thing. I just think you're going to like your team a lot more. It'll probably be a little more unique. And if those guys hit, you just have a lot more fun, because that means like you can brag to everyone like, oh yeah, I knew this guy, I really liked him, blah, 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 blah. So
yeah, I kind of missed out on Justin Jefferson in a few leagues last year, because I mean, he was going kind of high ish for being a rookie wide receiver. But I mean, I think he was my favorite wide receiver in that class. And anyway, and then he popped off, and I was like, shit. Like if I just would have went for the guy that I thought people were getting a little too hyped on, but I was hyped on, so there wasn't good value, I would have had a better season. However, he did get me in the semifinals of the big underdog tournament. So thank you for that, Mr. JJ. All right, Jeff, I think it's PF Chang time. How about you?
Sounds good.
All right, let's get it. Thank you for listening. For Jeff, until next week, good luck at your drafts, and toodaloo!